Lots of good stories. The first one, we're of course less than 2 weeks out from the US election. And as anticipation builds, the two presidential hopefuls are set to face off in the final debate on Thursday. But there's been a slight tweak to the rules. Moderators will now be able to mute the microphones of the candidates after many dubbed the previous event chaotic. The choice of topics this time has also raised a few eyebrows, as it won't include foreign policy. And many say this will deny Trump the chance to hit out at Joe Biden over the business dealings of his son, Hunter. Meanwhile, Republicans want the Twitter and Facebook heads to testify before Congress over alleged political bias. That follows the platforms taking down links to a New York Post article on Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. RT's Murad Gazdev delves into that and a few other controversies.
It is often the case that those who trumpet loudest about being fair and unbiased aren't at all. But Facebook really seems to mean it. They want fair elections, no meddling, and a president that America wants, and Facebook wants.
So today, I want to share the steps that we're taking to protect election integrity and make sure that Facebook is a force for good in democracy.
Part of what Facebook is doing is hiring people to police news. And one of the things that they're censoring is about the current scandal. So Joe Biden, his son, and Ukraine, which involves alleged meddling, abuse of power, blatant conflict of interest, and a whole lot of money going into the Biden's family accounts. Now, if you try to share a link to an article about this on Twitter or on Facebook, here's what you get.
The link you are trying to access has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially spammy or unsafe, in accordance with Twitter's URL policy.
How does this happen? How does a huge scandal get censored? The Bidens have a lot of friends, and one of those friends, who now happens to work as election integrity police at Facebook, is a certain Anna McAndrew. Anna used to work as Joe Biden's senior policy advisor for Europe and Eurasia, which includes Ukraine, precisely when Biden Jr. was raking in astounding sums of money from a Ukrainian energy company for doing, well, no one knows what, while Daddy told Ukrainian authorities how to run their country.
Anna McAndrew, Biden's senior policy advisor for Ukraine at the time, also listened to the calls and said release of the transcripts would only strengthen Biden's case that he acted properly. She helped Biden prepare for the conversations and said they operated at a high level.
If this wasn't enough corruption and cronyism for you, Anna was also a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, which dubs itself a non-partisan think tank. It also provided a slew of staff for Obama and his Democrat administration, James Jones, Susan Rice, etc. The point is, at the same time Anna was advising Joe Biden, at the same time his son was reportedly raking in millions of dollars from this Ukrainian energy company, the firm also began making payments to the Atlantic Council. $100,000 in donations. So under Anna's watch, this company was paying both Biden Jr., her boss's son, and the Atlantic Council, for which she worked. And now she's at Facebook, which previously partnered with the Atlantic Council. And are you at all surprised that stories critical of Biden are now disappearing?
While I will intentionally not link to the New York Post, I want to be clear that this story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform.
Breaking the news was Andy Stone, a career Democrat and, as is tradition, now a Facebook spokesperson. You couldn't make this up. Remember what I said about those who proclaim their neutrality loudest? Well,
Facebook is and always has been an open, transparent, and nonpartisan platform where people can express themselves freely.
Freely after approval from Facebook censors and fact-checkers, election integrity police, and chances are a former Joe Biden staffer. Aside from that, yes, freely.
Well, earlier, my colleague Nikki Aaron discussed this link between social media censorship and the American elections with a few of our guests.
Facebook, Google and Twitter previously vowed to prevent election interference through their platforms. To what extent do you think they've managed to fulfill that promise?
I don't really know what Twitter or Facebook could have done. What they have instead done is made a horrifying promise that they can regulate truth. That is hard enough to do in a world that isn't politics, where disinformation is part of the game.
Daniel, we're all aware of this big scandal right now over Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and the files from his laptop leaked to the New York Post. Twitter and Facebook have been actively blocking that story. Do you think they're justified in doing that?
No, of course they're not justified. It was an absolutely outrageous act. I mean, they showed a significant bias in going after the Hunter Biden disclosures. And I've read the Hunter Biden emails, and they strike me as perfectly valid, perfectly plausible. So I believe the story. And I think that Twitter and Facebook are deliberately trying to withhold information from the public in a clear effort to swing the election.
I would note that in the contrasting what happened with the Hunter Biden story, we need to think about the Christopher Steele dossier, which exploded across the world. It continues to get credence, despite having been utterly discredited at the outset by our own FBI. So, I mean, to me, it's crystal clear that whoever is operating these algorithms and operating these companies heavily favors, as does our mainstream media, the left and Democrats, and is pushing down back aggressively right now in ways that I think may very well suppress results and affect the 2020 election in this country.
And do you think there needs to be legal changes to restrict the power of online platforms to decide what we can and can't read?
Quite frankly, we are moving at a startling pace in terms of all these platforms, and we don't have laws that really apply to them. They've made promises they can't keep, and they are trying to please their user bases based solely on the outrage of the moment. The fact that Twitter banned that Hunter Biden link for a couple days, then reversed it on Friday, and yet still the New York Post can't unlock their Twitter account is exactly all you need to know to show what kind of coherence exists inside of Twitter, which on this issue is non-existent.
I mean, we should really adopt a very strict free speech standard here, which does away with censorship and opposes the very concept. But the important point is that the censorship is being imposed on Facebook and Twitter by the government. The government is afraid of these platforms. Liberals and Democrats are both pushing for a increased government regulation, and I think it's an assault on free speech. So I think that there should be as much free speech as possible, and that means there will be bad speech, but the only remedy for bad speech is good speech, more good speech.
Do you think the tech giants are harming the democratic process in the U.S.?
No, I think that they are providing a tremendous service in terms of giving us the platform to communicate with each other. The problem is them not setting hard ground rules and keeping to them in a way that is actively harming their ability to be those free platforms.
The people who are harming the democratic process in the U.S. are the Republican and Democratic